So we're over here at the bandsaws today. We have two bandsaws in the shop. The first thing I'm going to start out with here is just kind of the difference between these two, and you'll see the difference when I go and show them in depth. But this bigger white saw is what we're going to use for what's called resawing, or at the very least making only straight cuts. So you can see on this blade here, this is 1.25 inches thick. It is not going to make a tight curve or really any curve at all. It is primarily used for taking a board and actually making it thinner. It can be used to kind of just take a thin slice off of a board shortwise, but that's even not the best for this saw. Whenever we're using a bandsaw, one of the things, the more advanced things you'll hear about is we always want to have 3 teeth in the cut at one time. And because these teeth are actually spaced almost 1 inch apart, in 1.5 inch board, I'm only going to have 1, maybe 2 teeth in the board at a time, and that's really not the best. If I'm going this way in a 3.5 inch board, I'm going to have 3 or 4 teeth in the cut at any time. That's much better. Where on our saw over here, we've got about, I think that one maybe is 10 teeth per inch. So even if we're cutting something fairly thin, we have at least 3 or 4 teeth in the cut at any time. It also has a much narrower blade, which is easier for making curved cuts. Next thing we want to talk about here is our PPE. Just like anytime we're in the shop, we want to make sure we have our safety glasses on. We want to make sure that any loose clothing, any dangling strings, things like that are tucked away. With anything that has that circular motion, there's a chance that it would get caught and pull you into that blade. If it's tight, a tight watch, snug sleeves, we're not so concerned, but make sure there's nothing loose that can get caught. You're also certainly welcome to have hearing protection if you want, although these aren't super loud. Next thing we're going to talk about here is safety margin. On this saw with this big blade, I want you to keep the exact same safety margin you would keep on pretty much every tool, which is a hand's width away. So if you are pushing a board through this way, I don't even want a finger here. We're going to use some sort of a push stick to push that board up against the fence, and another push stick once we get our hand a little closer. I can use my hand back here, that's fine. But once I get up to here, I'm going to use something to push it through. When we get over to the saw with the smaller blade, that's going to be a little different. We'll talk about that one over there. Next thing we're going to talk about here is our guide. This here moves up and down. Right now, because I've got this big fence in here, this is about as low as I can go. I can loosen this guide up here, and then there is a wheel in the back that I can use to lower it just a little bit more, but that's about as low as I can go. Other than that, the general rule here is I want my guide to be as low as I can possibly have it. So if I'm cutting, if this fence was completely out of the way, move this fence out of the way here. If that fence was completely out of the way and I was cutting something like this, I'd want it way down here. The lower that blade guide can be, the better my saw is going to perform. Okay, next up, I'm going to go ahead and get ready to turn this saw on here. One of the things I'm going to tell you about this saw that's not really safety related is the fact that I keep these blades untensioned. So right now, this blade is pretty loose. So I'm going to actually have to turn this knob to tighten the tension up. And I will usually, before we're using it in class, do that for you. This one we're going to tension to about 30 on this little dial here. And that's going to make it much tighter and ready to go. When I turn this on, what you're going to notice is visually it is very hard to tell that this saw is moving. So we need to be careful whenever we're over here that we would assume that that is moving unless we have completely stopped it. Down at the bottom here, you can see there is a brake pedal. That yellow pedal down there will stop the saw blade. So unless you've stopped the saw blade, we're going to assume that that saw blade is still spinning. So let's go ahead and turn this on. There's a switch right here, right below my emergency stop, so I can turn it on like that. I'm really going to let my saw blade get up to speed on this one. It's a big blade, okay? And then just like with any saw, I'm pushing up against my fence. I'm using a push pad here. And feeding it through. Don't push it really hard. Just let it feed through it as slowly as you want. Now that I'm about here, I'm grabbing my push stick. I'm going to turn off my saw and hit the brake. Now I can grab my workpiece, and you can see I've made a nice little slice through that board that way. I can also cut this way. I'm going to do that next, and you're going to kind of see the difference there. Make sure my wood's not touching the blade. Okay, first to speed up, it's a really big blade. So you might have noticed there that it was a little bit louder, and that's because I have only a couple of teeth and not cut at any one time. But it did go quite a bit faster, just because it is a thinner piece of material. So there's cutting with that resaw blade. Let's go ahead and go over and talk about cutting with our other blade here. Okay, so on this saw we have a much thinner blade, and this one is for cutting curves into a piece of wood. So I'm just going to grab that same piece of wood here from last time, and I'm going to go ahead and do two things before I start. This lever here is going to tension my blade. I'm going to just double check that it's all where it should be here. Looks good. And then this blade guard I can move up and down with this knob. There's a lock on the back. I can unlock it, and I'm going to move this down so it is just above my work. I've got maybe a ½ an inch above it. On this saw, my safety margin is going to be a little bit lower. I'm not so concerned about keeping a full hands width away, because I might need the hands a little bit closer to direct my turn. What I want to make sure I have, where I want to make sure I have that full hands width, is directly behind the blade. So I might have my hands off to the side, but right back here, I'm going to be very careful that I'm not going to end up pushing my thumb into that blade once I cut through. Other than that, this tool works pretty much the same way. I've got a start button here. I'm going to wait for that bandsaw to speed up, and then I can start feeding my workpiece in. And you're going to see here that I can make a pretty curved cut. It's much, much slower because I've got way finer teeth, way smaller teeth. But once I cut through there, I'll turn my saw off and then use the brake pedal to slow it all the way down. And you can see I can cut curves on that bandsaw with the smaller blade. So there's our two bandsaws. Big white one here is only for cutting straight lines. We never want to use that one to try to cut a curve. And this one, cutting curves, but we don't want to try to cut through a whole big chunk of wood. It will take a very long time.